Greetings, pilgrims, and welcome back to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage, and today we are continuing with our Ultimate Battle Royale series. Now, as you know, last time we completed our play button, so we're getting ready to say I want to go into the game world, which is getting closer and closer to doing our battle, which is awesome. But first, before we can do that, before we can complete that, we need to get our character working. And you can see here on the screen I have our character. I just want to give you a quick rundown as to what this character is going to be able to do when we're done with this short series to get them in the game. And then eventually, yes, we're going to work towards having a friend. Okay? Now, I know it's exciting, so I'll show you here. If I pause the game and I maximize, you can see here, I do indeed have two characters running in the same scene. I can run up to this character, and now you won't see him in there until I go back to Unity, which is right here, and I unpause because right now he's kind of frozen in space. But you can see that he sees my IK. I can run around. He sees where I am. So we indeed have multiplayer networking. Okay? So, pardon me. My throat is a mess. So we are working towards this point. Now, in order to get here, we need to make sure our character is all set up. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to get the characters in here. I'm going to show you some behind the scenes as to how the character is working, where it's coming along, where we're going with it. We're going to get the character to be able to run around. He won't be holding the gun today, and he won't be doing the IK today because we have a lot of ground to cover, and I don't want these episodes to turn into an hour plus long, and nobody finishes going through them, you know. So we want to make sure they're nice and bite-sized. We'll do a little bit. Don't worry, I've already got the next several things set up, so there'll be another video probably in about 2 weeks, so it'll be a much faster turnaround once we get the ball rolling with these things, okay? So let's take a look at what our character contains, and then we'll worry about getting to that point. But first, before we do that, let's take a look at our actual characters. So, as you may or may not know, we have these two wonderful character base mesh models from Mr. Aaron Walker, so thank you again, sir. I'm going to show you his site. I'm going to show you how we got this sort of animated and ready to go. So, for now, we are going to be using Mixamo, but I am going to be doing some custom rigging, so the characters will be updated as we go along with the series, okay? And don't worry, I will make a clear note that if you come back to the series, or if you're new to the series in the future, and you won't have to go through all of this. We'll just have an update at some point to say, here's the characters, you're ready to go. So, Mr. Aaron Walker very graciously agreed, and we have a signed agreement where I purchased a license to these two characters. So anyone who follows the Battle Royale series, you'll be able to download these characters and use them in your Battle Royale game. And I'll be creating all the accessories, so things like the weapons you've seen. We're going to do clothing, different outfits, hats, goggles, whatever, all the different little trinkets you have on your character. So if you go to his page here, this is at Flipped Normals. I'll put the link in the description as well. So here's his work here, some very nice stylized base meshes. Here's a couple other things for sale as well. And you can see here's the character set that I bargained for. So we got that all set. And then as I mentioned, yes, we are using Mixamo for the time being. So here you can see the character in Mixamo. Don't worry about all the flashing here. This is Z fighting because he's wearing every possible shirt at the same time. That way the skin weights get married to it, and now all the shirts go with him, and then we can just hide or show whichever shirt we want. So there's going to be a couple different variants of that. So speaking of that, let's take a look at that very quickly. If I pull up Maya here, you can see here's the scene where I've been working on all the characters and all their little pieces and parts. So we have our two characters. Right now they're not going to have hair. In the future, I'll be adding that. I'm not very good at hair, so it's taking a little bit of time. But we have a male and female to begin with. And as you can see here, a couple different shirt variants. For the male, I'm doing different facial hairstyles. And then here I was breaking down doing the masks and doing different facial and head, accessories. And then over here, we have the female base mesh, working on different pants and shorts variants, and then she has several different tops, so you can choose from those. So yeah, we'll have all kinds of stuff like this. I'm working on these here, and then as we go along, I'll add these. These will probably be ready about the time we get to the coding to do things like swapping the outfits, so that'll be probably good, serendipitous moment there where these two things come together. So just wanted to give you a look behind the curtain. You can see there's a lot of work going on here to get these characters tip-top shape for you, okay? So, let's take a look at our character, and this is in my other project right now. This is the project where we figure everything out, and then we're going to go over to our game project, and I'll show you how we're going to make this work, okay? So in this game project, we have our character, and let's collapse all this because this is confusing to you. There you go. So this is really all he is. He's really just a couple of scripts, an animator, and then a couple of objects over here. So we'll do a quick walk through, and then we'll get to building, okay? So starting over here, you see he has the different shirt combinations. So again, these are all rigged, so you can just hide or show whichever one you want. So we got that one there. We got the full shirt, as you saw before, and I think this is like a thinner strap. Yeah, so this is like a tank top, like your muscle dude, whatever you want. And they have also been unwrapped, so you'll be able to put logos. We'll go over that in a future episode, but you'll be able to put logos, designs, whatever you want. It's all set up for you, ready to go. Next, we have this object here, which for now we are using Mixamo. So this is the actual skeletal rig. So every model has to have a skeleton inside of it, just like you and I have a skeleton inside. And when we move our muscles, we move the skeleton, it tells our skin how to move, right? So a model is the same way, it just has different terms. So the skeleton is still called bones. Then when you tell it how much it wants to move each vertex, that's what we call skin weighting, a weight, 1 to 0. How much weight does it have? So like your fingertip, for example, has 100% weight. Every time you move your fingertip through the world, say you're a 3D model, it's moving all the vertices that make up your fingertip with that bone 100% of the time. But then you get to something like your chest or your leg or your neck is a good example. You can stretch your neck and turn your neck in different ways, and you see how it stretches, but no one point really goes 100% with anything. It's kind of shared or blended between 2 points, like your head and your neck bone. So as you move your head and neck around, it kind of stretches a little bit like we expect, right? Same thing for our 3D models. So for this, here's all of our bones. These are all the bones in the body, and you can see they're all nicely organized. These are going to be important just because we're going to have a certain point where we're going to put things like, if we want to put something in their hand, then we attach it to that bone, that sort of thing. For now, you can ignore this, leave it alone. For this episode, like I said, we're not going to have the gun, but this is the first of the guns that we've completed, is the M1911, and it's fully animated, or not animated yet, sorry. It's fully articulated to be animated. So the pieces are separate. You can pull out the slide, you can pull out the trigger, all that kind of stuff. And as you can see here, we do have some things here, but don't worry about any of this right now. We're not doing this for this episode, okay? We have a follow target. We have the player's camera behind them. There it is. We have the aim target, the thing that they're going to be aiming at, right? We have a crosshair target, and then we have the actual model, the actual physical model itself. So just a couple parts and pieces, not too much. See, it's not too many things. And then when we look at the top level, the player character model, the object itself, which contains all this, you can see we have a whole bunch of stuff here. So let's go through it really quickly together. Don't worry about too much of what it is right now. I just want you to get an overview. So obviously with the transform, that's with every object. We have an animator. So we're going to create this player controller. Actually, we're going to import it today. I'll show you. We have the avatar, which is the unique specification to this model with this set of animations and these bones. That's what that means. And then we have a player controller. So this you might be familiar with if you follow basic Unity tutorials. This is what actually physically moves the character through the world. But we're going to tell it how to do that with our player controller script that we're going to write today together, right here. So this just tells us how fast we're moving, what is my animator, what is my object, and then these are some things we're going to use a little bit later on, but when we're scoping and when we're not scoping, so when we get to that point, so we just left ourselves a little breadcrumbs for later, okay? Now we're not going to be covering this today, but this is our camera controller script. So this will more smoothly deal with our camera for today. The camera is just going to kind of follow us around behind us. It's going to be kind of a dumb camera, but it will prove that our character works in the scene, okay? And then we have an IK controller script. This is a part of Unity. We'll go over this. This is what allows the look up and down, and it moves your hands, and it moves the head so he looks where we're looking. So that's what that does. And then the bottom stuff here is all photon stuff that we're going to go over when we get to the point of spawning the characters in the scene. But very briefly, a photon view says what are the things that photon should keep an eye on, and it's going to keep an eye on our animator, our position in the world, and our player setup script. So these first two are so that it can replicate to every other player, hey, you moved forward 5 feet and you jumped. So it needs to show that to everyone else, right? Then our player setup script, which is here at the bottom, this is controlling what things should we see and what things should we not see if we are and if we are not the player. And we'll get into the technicalities of that later, but this just means that if you and I are both playing, I turn off your camera from my character so I don't see through your character's eyes. Like, that wouldn't be fair, right? Especially like a deathmatch scenario. You don't want to be able to see your opponent. That's unfair. So we turn off things that are not owned by us so that we only see the things that are owned by us because we want to see where our character is, right? Okay. So I know that's a ton of information really, really quickly, but don't worry about it. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with all this. So let me minimize this, and here's our secondary character as well. You can see, I think I closed it, so yeah, the other guy disappeared, so we'll just close that for now. Okay, so let's go over to our normal project here, and we're going to get started with doing all that. So here is our project. Now, we need to bring in the player model, the animations that we need, the animator controller. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do, so I made it nice and simple. So all we have to do is go up to our assets and say import package, custom package. Now you're going to point to, for me, this is on my project folder, but for you, this is going to be the download files that you download, and we're just going to choose each of these, right? So we're going to say UBR player start. So that's Ultimate Battle Royale, UBR. This is the player start. So I'm going to say open. And it's going to say, hey, I got these two things that you want me to import. Under the meshes folder, I'm going to bring in a model for you. And then under the resources, I'm going to have a player prefab. And I'm going to say, okay, that's cool. I'll take that. Import. Now let's check that out. We go under meshes and we go under right there. There he is. So I'm going to put him under characters. I'm just going to drag and drop him under characters. So now he's just under the characters folder. That's all, just so that he's there. And here's all of his settings and everything. We can say he's got a rig. It's humanoid, created from this model. Animations are all set. We shouldn't have to touch any of this because it all came in from our package, but we'll test that as well together, okay? Now, again, let's go to Assets, Import Package, Custom Package. We want to choose Player Animation Controller, so let's import that. It's going to say, hey, under Animation Controllers, I'm going to bring in the Player Controller, and you can see it says New, meaning this is a new file being added to your project. Then also under Animations, under Male, because this is the male versus the female character, Animations. Then we have the Strafe Animations, and that's the animations we use to move around. So, okay, let's go ahead and import that. Very cool. So now we can check that out as well. So let's go under Animation, and we have a couple of folders here. So we have under Animation Controllers, we should have Player Controller. Let's open that up and take a look at it. All right, there it is. And let's see, our parameters are set. Yep, our layers are set. Our locomotion is set. So here's why we imported this versus building this together. First of all, credit to Mike, Big Shot Gaming, who helped me out with all of this. We figured all this out in that other project I showed you. That's our secret project that we've been figuring it all out. So then I can then break it down and bring it to you guys as tutorials. So he helped me with all of this. So thank you again, Mike. I'm going to briefly explain what all this is, but you shouldn't have to touch it, and there are official Unity tutorials on this, so please view that reference material. That helps to keep this episode a little bit shorter. So in theory, what we have here is we have a blend tree, and if I go back up to my base layer, so this is how you're used to seeing an animation controller, right? So we're going to say from coming into this, we're going to go straight to locomotion. And locomotion normally would be an animation, but instead, this is a special type of animation controller object here. Is if you right click, you can say create state, or you can say new blend tree. What this means is if I click this, you'll see over here this weird looking diagram. This means that I have these 8 or 9 different animations. Let's see, 3, 6, 9 different animations, because there's all the way around and there's right in the center, and it's going to blend between them based upon a value. So like when you have your character running, right, you start off standing still and you go running. You don't want them to be standing still and then just pop into a running pose, right? You want them to kind of walk forward a little bit and then start moving their arms, and now I'm running really fast and now I'm going to slow down, right? So that kind of thing is what this handles. It's going to blend between those states. So we have all these different states here, and you see here it says rapid, strafe, right, run, forward. So that's running forwards, running backwards, strafing to the right, which means I'm moving side to side, but I'm looking forward. Strafing forwards. Strafe idle, which means I'm just standing still. Strafe, rapid strafe forwards. And then we have strafe right. And you can see there's strafe right and there's strafe right. So what does that mean, right? Why are there two? So what this means is if you look at here, obviously, if we want to go backwards or forwards, right, that's the same animation, just reversed one way or the other, right? So if I have a run forwards, And if I reverse that, I'm running backwards, right? So the strafe right on the one side, and then the other strafe right here gets multiplied by a negative number. So you can see here, strafe right on this third one down, positive x is 1, meaning I'm saying I want to move forward, or move it to the right rather, and play the animation speed at 1 time. So that's what this means, the little clock. Yep, see? Change animation speed. Now if I go down here to the second strafe right, it says -1, meaning I want to move left actually. So play the animation -1, meaning play it backwards. So we're just making clever use of fewer animations to get more motion out of it. That's all it does really. Now you'll notice that also over here, we have all these animations feeding into the blend tree and there's just 2 numbers. That's all it is, it's 2 numbers. Well, technically it's like 6 numbers because it's 0 for each and then it's -1 and +1 for each. So we have X and Y, which is the forward and back, left and right on your keyboard that you're going to be running around with. And it's saying based upon those numbers, as these change, it will blend differently. So you see here, if I start to drag this, you see that the different ones highlight. You see the little thing moving over there? So this is my left to right movement. I want to move fully left, which is -1, which we talked about right here. -1. Play the animation of running right backwards because I want to run left. So that's what that does. Now if I want to run forwards, I go this way. So now I'm running forwards. Now I'm running backwards. And you can see them highlight as we go through here. So that's all this does, is it just blends between the different animation states based upon these numbers. So we're just going to feed those numbers to it from the script we're going to write together today. Okay? Cool. So that's all this does. We're all set up. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at putting this into our world and putting it onto our character like we have it set up in this other project. Okay? So let's do that together now. So I'm going to say File, New Scene rather. And we're in a new scene, and we're going to need a couple things. I'm going to create a ground cube. So just I'm going to right click and say 3D object cube. I'm going to put it at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to set the scale to something like, I don't know, 100 and 100. There you go. So just have a big, big cube. And there it is. Let me get out of 2D mode. There it is. Okay. Now, cubes are a height of 1. So I'm going to actually set the position on the Y to -0.5. So if I put something in here at 0, 0, 0, it will actually sit right on the surface of this. So let's rename this to floor, and I'm going to bring in a cube just to prove to you that point. So if I go 0, 0, 0, oh, see, a little bit wrong. So, oh, that's because the cube has a center pivot. But if I put a cube at 0.5, you see how if this was an object with a bottom pivot, like most objects I create are, then this will sit right on the floor. So this is how our character is going to sit on the floor here like this. Just like that. Perfect. Okay. So delete that for now. It was just for explanation. Let's bring our character into the scene. So we're going to go to Meshes. Remember, we moved into the Characters folder. I'm just going to drag and drop him into the scene. And there he is. And like I said, now that we put this at the bottom, you see that he's standing up properly. Now, he's got all this craziness going on because he has all the shirts on at once. So we're just going to open him up and say, we want to choose just one shirt. So I'm going to take B and C and just hide them for now. There you go. So he's just wearing his default shirt. Cool. All right, that's all he is for now. So let's click on him, and you'll notice that he has an animator here. And remember, the animator, we need to put in the controller. That's the thing we were just looking at. So we're just going to click the little circle with the dot in the middle to say, I want to find one. And it's going to say, okay, I looked at the project, and here's all the things that are possible. And I'm going to say player controller. That's the one we wanted. There you go. Now, if I were to hit play right now, I'm not going to be able to control my character. He's just going to sit there and stand there because there's no controls, because there's no way for me to tell right now the player controller animator this in the locomotion. There's no way for me to give it these values through the keyboard and mouse. See here, if I click in the game scene, I can't do that. If I were to increase these numbers, you can see how he starts to move around the world. See that? That's because I'm doing it here. So we need to do it programmatically. We need to do it via code, right? So that's what we're going to do together now. So I'm going to open this up, and we're going to have this over here, and we're going to do it together here, one step at a time, all right? So for our character, we're going to put a script on him. And if you remember, this is going to be our player controller script. So let's go to our scripts folder. We're going to write it together. Don't worry, it's not hard. It's not long at all. So we're going to say create. So in our scripts folder, right click, create C# script. Let's call it player controller, just like that, all one word. Okay, I'm going to double click it to open it. It's going to open up here. Now, very simply, this is going to be adding those inputs into the player controller, right? So at the very top here, we're going to need some variables. So I'm going to just do a little bars for variables. We're going to need a couple of things. First of all, we're going to make this a static class so we can see it from anywhere. So player controller, I'm going to call it instance. You remember this, we've done this a couple times. Next, we're going to need a speed. So we'll say public float speed. That's how fast our character moves. We're going to need an access to our animator. There we go. Public animator, anim for short. We're going to need a handle to our character controller eventually. We don't have that in just yet, so we're just going to do that. Character controller, we're going to call it CC for short. We're going to need a private, we don't need to call it private, but vector2 move input. We're going to need a vector3 root motion. And we're going to need access to our character. So we're going to say public game object. Oops, type it correctly, Matt. Player object, player obj for short. The public bool is scoping. We don't need this yet, but I'm going to follow along with what I've already done here. We're going to come back to that. We're not going to use that today, so I'll just comment that out for now. But it will be coming. And the same thing with our public camera scope cam. That's coming later as well. But we'll leave these little breadcrumbs for ourselves, right? And then public key code button. So this is going to be the thing we're going to use to eventually test things like jumping and such. So, but we don't need that for right now. Okay. With that said, our start function is not going to be enough. We are going to need to use the awake function. So we're going to say public void awake. And in awake, we're going to say instance equals this. This means that our public static instance we made of ourself, we're going to say anywhere you find one of these, this is the only one. This copy right now is the only one that matters. Okay. So in start, we're going to do some assignments, some automatic assignments. We're going to say our anim is equal to get component animator. Now you can do it two ways. You can do it like this. Animator, spell it correctly. You can do it like this, which means when the code runs, it will set it up for you, so you don't have to remember. Or you can assign it in the inspector. But if you forget, you'll get something like a null reference exception, and so it's up to you. This might be easier if you find that you forget that kind of stuff often. Then this might be easier. Okay. So very simply, in update, we're going to be calling a function that we're going to make called movement. We're just going to say, hey, I want you to tell my character how to move. All right. So to move, we're going to be applying things to the animator. And by doing that, we're going to call this function on animator move. All right. And what this is going to do is going to say root motion plus equals the anim.delta position, meaning we're going to add to what we already have for root motion the change in our animation position. So it's going to say plus equals. Okay. Now let's make our movement function. So public void movement. So now this will stop getting mad at me for calling a function that doesn't exist yet. And very simply, we're going to say move input dot x is equal to input dot get access. So that's where we're going to get keyboard and mouse stuff, mostly keyboard. Horizontal, and we're going to say, hey, take that horizontal and multiply it by my speed. And then very similarly, I'm just going to copy this whole line, throw it in here, and then we're going to say this is going to be y now, get access vertical times speed. All right. And now we're going to go to our animator. Whoops. We're going to go to our animator dot set float. And remember those two parameters I showed you, right? The input X and the input Y. These are the things that we were saying we can manually drag it, but we want to be able to drag it through code. That's what we're doing right now. So here you can say animator set float input X is equal to my input X, my move input X, which is coming from my keyboard. Okay, so when you press the button on the keyboard, let me do the second line here, so we get the Y value as well, and then I'll talk about it. Input Y. Okay, so when we press the keyboard, A, D, or W, S, right? So A and D is my horizontal. It's going to say, hey, get that feedback, that 1 to 0, multiply it by your speed, and call it this. And then it's going to say, hey, go tell the animator and pass in that value you just saved for the X, for that first slider that made me go left and right. That's all. And then the same thing for the Y, which is the up and down, which is the W and S. Now, character controller move, I'm going to say root motion. So we're saying, hey, now that we've got all this information, right, I want you to apply this to that character controller. Remember I said that's what actually controls the character through the world, right? So why is he doesn't like root motion? What did I do wrong? Oh, I did call it room motion and all these. It should be root. Root. I'm sorry. Root motion on all those spots. There we go. So we're going to say character controller move to move me through the world based upon what we just saved. And then root motion, we're going to reset it to a vector 3.0, meaning we're going to make it say nothing in the very next tick that goes by, so that we don't just keep adding to ourselves, because then you would end up like teleporting through the whole world because you'd run so fast. So that's it. That's the whole code. It's nothing fantastic. Look, it's less than 50 lines of code if you count the fact that we have spaces and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so we'll save that. Let's go back to our scene. And assuming that everything is all well with the world, let's check our console. No errors. That's always a good sign. So let's go to our character. And we're going to apply our player controller script. Now we also need a character controller. It's not on here yet. So let's add that. And it's very simple. You just click the add component and we're going to search for character. There you go. Character controller. Add that. And you can rearrange these, which I recommend, keeping them in sort of the same order. I'm going to move this up here. Oh, I see. Yeah, so let's do that. I'm going to unpack the prefab completely. Right click, unpack prefab. Now I can make changes to it. Right there. There you go. So now it just goes animator, character controller, player controller. That's just a little easier. All right, so let's take a look at these settings. I think all of this looks good, but we do want to change a couple of things because you can see how right now it's like underneath the ground and we don't want that. So these first couple options are fine, but then we want to change our offset here on the Y specifically to 0.97. And I'm going to change the radius to 0.25 and change the height to 1.81. And these are just numbers that I found that work well with this character model. So if and when, we may not do the female together, but I'll provide the female character model for you guys as well. So if you follow the same steps and kind of salt to taste and make it work for her, these numbers might be different because she is a little bit shorter than he is. So just take that into account. Okay, now let's set this up and we should be able to run our character around. So we're going to say speed 1.2. The animator is going to be the player animator, which is this right here. So I'm just going to click and drag right from here, click and drag right there. And the player object is myself, but it's going to be this guy, which we're going to rename in a moment right there. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's rename this head level object. I'm going to rename this to player. There we go. Okay. So hit save and let's save this scene together. So we say scenes. We're not going to put it in the pun scene. This is our player. Wow, player setup. Okay, so this is just an extra scene for us to be able to set up the player together, and it should be all set, all ready to go. Okay, very good. Now let's give it a test. I'm gonna hit play, and you can see the character sitting there. Now if I hit I'm hitting A and D. I'm hitting W and S. And there we go. Our character is running around the scene. So that's what we got for today. Let me go ahead. We do have the camera. We can change this to say player camera. And for now, if we just put it underneath of him, it'll follow along with him. It's going to be it's going to be a little janky, but it'll work to at least so we can see ourselves. So if we hit save again, and now I'll hit play again, we should be able to move, and at least the camera comes with us. So it's not going to be great. We can't turn or anything yet, but we'll get to that in the next video or two as we do the other scripts. But we can at least move around, so we have our character in the scene. You can see how it's blending between those animations. So when I stop, it kind of slowly goes back to where it was. And so he can run forward and backwards, and you can see that's the same animation, just reversed. So there you go. We have our movement. We can move around the scene. We have a custom character. We brought in animation controller. We did some scripting. We did a lot in just about a 30-minute episode for today. So we're going to call it here for now. But then the next episode will be out very shortly. We're going to continue with the rest of those scripts. We're going to get it all working so we can run around the scene. We can look up and down and all that kind of stuff. Then we'll move on to spawning into the game world. Then we're going to start talking about filling out the game world. And then we'll talk about doing things like other characters, teams, shooting at people, that kind of stuff. Those are all coming, but we have to do it one step at a time and make sure that as we do these things that we build on solid foundation from before, okay? So I appreciate your patience. We're getting there quickly, guys. We're one step closer today, and I thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and as always, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.